What went wrong? How did Arkansas become the southern state that so resisted school desegregation so violently that federal troops were sent in to enforce court orders and impose school desegregation? Precisely the very outcome that Arkansas moderates, the president, and the Supreme Court itself had so fervently hoped to avoid. Of course, Little Rock white leaders at the time were both bewildered and surprised by the outcome. How, as Virgil Blossom, the school superintendent, put it, had it happened here? How could a city that was enjoying unprecedented economic growth, had quietly desegregated so many public facilities, and had received national acclaim for its own voluntary school desegregation plan, how could this progressive city, a model of racial harmony, become a symbol of massive resistance, the subject of national and international opprobrium? Well, of course, we're here to learn from the past. I have to caution that, as the British historian A.J.B. Taylor said, historians learn from the mistakes of the past how to make the same mistakes again. From the start, Little Rock leaders blamed outsiders, whites from outside Little Rock, for the troubles. But of course, the most convenient scapegoat, the easiest way of absolving themselves of responsibility, was to blame Governor Forbes, who, they argued, undermined their own responsible position by stirring up the forces of mass popular resentment. In 1990, former Governor Sid McMath laid out this position bluntly in an interview with John Edgerton. You know, custom dies hard, but there were people, intelligent people and educated people, and people in positions of leadership that knew desegregation was inevitable. The Brown decision, you know, and it's just a matter of time. You know, Virgil Blossom had this plan which he had taken to all the civic groups and the labor organizations and various groups in Little Rock and had their approval. It was an integration. But people were willing to accept, you know, people are law-abiding. They were willing to accept it as the law of the land. They didn't like it. Of course, they would welcome an alternative, and Forbes gave it to them. The Virgil Blossom plan, if Forbes had stayed out of it, would have gone in and worked. If they'd had proper leadership at the time, the Central High School thing would never have happened. Now, other people today are going to be looking at really at sort of how partial and self-serving that statement was, looking at the crisis and responsibility for it in detail. What I want to look at is the reaction to the Brown decision in white Arkansas up to the Southern Manifesto of March 1956, when the entire congressional delegation, liberal and conservatives, signed that blast of defiance at the Supreme Court. And what I want to argue is that there was no reason to be surprised by the Little Rock crisis of 1957. The political dynamics of the race issue that so inhibited effective response to that crisis were already in play by March 1956. Specifically, I'll argue 3 points. First, that Forbes was convinced by the events of early 1956 that it was political suicide to defy mass white segregationist sentiment. But second, that Forbes himself helped create the segregationist sentiment, which he later claimed to be the prisoner of. And third, and equally important, that racial moderate politicians had already displayed the fatalism and caution which rendered them so ineffective and impotent when the crisis developed in 1957-58. In March 1956, Sam Harris in the Arkansas Gazette argued that Arkansas, until recently, had been fulfilling the hopes of those that moderate, responsible leaders would maintain a, quote, balanced stand on integration. He said that, quote, despite the best efforts of extremists in the integration versus segregationist argument, the volatile subject hadn't become an important item in the political field until a few weeks ago. And up until the end of 1955, Arkansas did indeed look as if it was moving responsibly in the way the Supreme Court hoped. Back in 1954, conservative Governor Cherry had quite simply stated that the law would be obeyed. By 1955, 3 of Arkansas school districts had already desegregated. Indeed, the university town of Fayetteville in northwestern Arkansas had claims to be the first community in the South to announce its intention of desegregating its schools. And desegregation had followed peacefully in September '54. The Charleston School District, also in the West, had in fact opened its schools on an integrated basis the month before. Both school districts had very small black populations, and the costs of busing blacks to all black high schools were crippling. In northeastern Arkansas, Hoxie followed suit in 1955. The Little Rock School Board, in turn, announced its intention of desegregating in the fall of 1957. Governor Forbes, perceived as a racial moderate, showed little desire to interfere in the decisions of these local school boards. The state legislature in 1955 had failed to pass a pupil assignment law which would have circumvented the Brown decision. Segregationist pressure groups like the White Citizens Council of Arkansas and White America, Inc. Lacked, as Neil McMillan showed, both the popular support and the elite leadership that characterized similar groups in states like Mississippi and Alabama. The councils campaigned against desegregation in Hoxie, but failed in the face of determined court opposition and the refusal of the governor to intervene. Now, this picture of moderation, of course, has to be qualified. Undoubtedly, most white Arkansans favored the continuation of segregation if possible. Even those who now believe segregation to be wrong were in no hurry to give up the privileges, naturally in no hurry to give up the privileges that segregation brought to whites. Some whites had undoubtedly come to the conclusion that segregation was wrong from a Christian and moral point of view, but those decisions tended to be individual decisions. State and regional church groups were more likely to make these sorts of points, more likely than local congregations.